Your kitchen might look completely set for anything. Cabinets filled, the freezer packed tight, and the pantry neatly arranged. It's a reassuring sight, at least until that confidence suddenly disappears. Because here's the part people rarely think about, until they find themselves standing in a dark kitchen with no heat, no power, and an empty stomach. The problem isn't that you've run out of food, it's that you can't actually prepare any of it. All those staples, pasta, rice, even frozen dinners, become instantly useless the second the electricity goes out, the gas stops working, or you have to leave in a hurry. Studies repeatedly show that most households end up storing foods that depend entirely on heat to be usable. In other words, they're preparing for emergencies with supplies that only work when everything is functioning normally. But the 12 foods we're about to cover don't have that problem. They require no cooking, no equipment, and no prep at all. And you can find every single one of them in a regular grocery store without spending much. Stick with us, because item number 4 is something even well-prepared households often overlook. According to emergency nutrition experts, it's one of the quickest ways to get energy during a real crisis. Yet most people pass by it every week without even noticing. Number 12. Tortillas. When most people think about emergency carbs, they almost always default to the same option: bread. It's familiar, it feels comforting, and it seems like the obvious choice to build around. But there's a catch that usually doesn't become obvious until it's too late. Bread doesn't last very long. Within just a few days, it starts to spoil. It also doesn't hold up well under pressure. Pack it in a bag for an evacuation, and by the time you arrive, it's likely crushed into crumbs. Leave it sitting during a warm weather power outage, and it's already on borrowed time. Tortillas, on the other hand, play by completely different rules. A sealed pack of flour tortillas typically stays good far longer than standard bread. Because they're flat and flexible, they stack easily, compress down without issue, and barely take up any room at all. You can fit a pack of 10 into about the same space as a thin notebook. They're also much tougher than they look. You can pack them, move them around, and handle them repeatedly without worrying about them falling apart. But here's the part most preparedness checklists overlook. A tortilla isn't just something you eat on its own. It works as a simple, portable way to combine other foods. Things like tuna, beans, peanut butter, or jerky can all be wrapped into one compact, handheld meal that doesn't require a plate, utensils, or even a stable surface. In situations where you're on the move or juggling multiple tasks, that kind of practicality becomes more than just convenient. It's a real advantage. A smart approach is to keep a few packs on hand and rotate them into your regular meals every couple of months. They're inexpensive, easy to find almost anywhere, and in an emergency they can turn out to be one of the most versatile items you have. Number 11. Instant oats. There's a common belief people carry into emergency planning without ever really questioning it. Oatmeal requires heat to be edible. That assumption turns out to be wrong, and it causes many households to overlook one of the most practical no-cook foods available. Instant oats don't actually need to be cooked. You can prepare them using cold water. Just mix, give it a stir, and let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes. Over that short time, they soften into something close enough to traditional oatmeal that the difference is easy to live with. This approach, known as cold soaking, is widely used by long-distance hikers and endurance athletes who can't carry cooking gear. No stove, no power, just water and a bit of patience. But what really makes oats stand out isn't just how you prepare them, it's how they fuel your body. Many shelf-stable emergency foods lean heavily on either protein or fat. Both are important, but they don't fully cover one key need: steady, long-lasting energy. Oats fill that gap. They're packed with complex carbohydrates and fiber, which break down slowly and release energy over time instead of causing a sharp spike followed by a crash. Studies on glycemic response consistently show that high-fiber grains help maintain stable blood sugar levels far longer than more refined foods. A serving of cold-soaked oats can keep energy levels steady for roughly 3 to 4 hours, which makes a real difference at the start of a demanding day. They're also easy to combine with other foods, which adds to their value. Mix in peanut butter, and you boost both fat and protein. Add canned fruit, and you get extra moisture along with natural sweetness. Toss in some nuts, and suddenly you've got a calorie-dense, well-rounded meal. One simple base ingredient can turn into several complete meal options. A practical way to use them: keep a supply on hand, store them dry, and rotate as needed. They're inexpensive, lightweight, and can last for years when properly stored. Just remember, cold soaking depends entirely on having clean water available. Without that, oats quickly go from being a reliable option to completely unusable. Number 10. Canned fruit. Around the second or third day of relying on a typical emergency food supply, something subtle starts to shift. It's not dramatic, but it gradually affects how you feel and function. After days of eating dense, dry, protein-heavy foods, your body begins asking for something different: new textures, fresher flavors, and most importantly, moisture. This isn't just a casual craving, it's a real physiological response. Research into dietary monotony shows that when people eat the same types of food repeatedly, appetite can actually drop due to sensory fatigue. Ignore that in an emergency, and you're setting yourself up for a predictable problem. Canned fruit solves this issue in a way very few other foods can. Most people look at a can of peaches or pineapple and think about calories or maybe a bit of vitamin C. What often gets overlooked is the liquid inside. That juice or syrup isn't just filler, it's an additional source of hydration. In a situation where water needs to be rationed, that extra fluid becomes genuinely valuable. Many people instinctively pour it off without thinking, but in an emergency, that habit turns into unnecessary waste. There's also the benefit of natural sugars. They enter the bloodstream quickly, giving a noticeable boost in energy and alertness. It's not long-lasting fuel, but when someone is exhausted and needs to function within a short window, say the next 20 minutes, that quick lift can make a difference. Fruits like peaches, pineapple, and mandarin oranges still retain a decent amount of vitamin C, even after being canned. That matters more than people think, especially as physical strain and stress build over several days and your immune system needs support. Then there's a factor most preparedness guides barely mention: morale. A bit of sweetness can have a real impact on mood. It might sound minor, but after several days of eating bland, salty foods, opening a can of fruit can briefly restore a sense of normalcy. In a prolonged disruption, that mental boost isn't something to dismiss. A practical approach is to keep a reasonable number of cans on hand and rotate them into your regular meals. They are heavier than many other options on this list, so it's best not to overstock, but they're too useful to leave out entirely. That covers the first quarter of the list. If any of these surprised you, mention which one stood out. It's a useful way to see what most households tend to overlook. Number 9. Protein bars. A lot of people toss protein bars into their emergency kits, thinking of them as nothing more than a workout snack that can serve as backup food. That perspective really doesn't capture how useful they can be in a real situation. Here's the part most people don't connect. When blood sugar drops too low, not just slightly but to a point where it's actually depleted, both mental and physical performance take a hit. Research on individuals in high-stress, resource-limited environments consistently shows the same pattern. Thinking slows down, mistakes become more frequent, and handling multiple priorities gets noticeably harder. In a crisis, that mental decline can be more dangerous than hunger or fatigue. The real risk isn't just feeling weak, it's losing the ability to think clearly when decisions matter most. Protein bars aren't a complete nutritional solution. Most of them provide somewhere around 180 to 220 calories, along with 8 to 12 grams of protein. That's not enough to replace a full meal, but it's usually sufficient to bring blood sugar back up to a functional level, high enough to stabilize thinking and keep you going for a few hours. It helps to think of them as a bridge rather than a base. They're there to carry you through a gap, not to serve as your primary food source. Their design supports exactly that role. Individually wrapped, easy to carry, durable, and shelf-stable, they don't need refrigeration or special handling. For something like a vehicle emergency kit, they're especially practical since they handle temperature changes better than most other foods. If you end up stranded, having something like this on hand can make sure you're not running on empty. A practical approach is to keep them in rotation. Eat them occasionally and replace what you use so they stay fresh. They're not meant to be the core of your supply, but they're a dependable fallback when the situation demands quick energy and clear thinking without any effort. Number 8. Crackers. At first glance, crackers don't seem like they belong on a serious emergency food list. They're not calorie-dense, and nutritionally, they're nothing special. Still, they show up again and again in well-researched preparedness guides, and there's a reason for that, though it has very little to do with their nutrient profile. Here's what tends to happen when an emergency stretches past the first couple of days. People stop eating actual meals and instead rely on disconnected pieces of food. A spoonful of peanut butter here, a handful of nuts there, maybe some tuna straight from the pouch. Eating becomes less about nourishment and more about simple maintenance. That shift might seem minor at first, but over time it adds up. Studies in disaster psychology show that losing the structure of regular meals can have a measurable impact on morale and mental resilience. When food loses its sense of form and routine, it can quietly wear down your ability to stay focused and steady. This is where crackers come in. They add a sense of structure back into the process. Put tuna on a cracker, and suddenly it feels like something assembled. Spread peanut butter across one, and it becomes a small composed bite instead of just another ingredient. The brain processes that differently. It recognizes that something has been made, even if it's simple. That subtle shift carries more weight than most guides give it credit for. There's also a practical side to it. Eating crackers one at a time naturally slows you down, which helps regulate how quickly you go through your food without needing to consciously ration every bite. When you're trying to stretch supplies over an uncertain period, that built-in pacing becomes surprisingly useful. A good approach is to go for low-sugar options with straightforward ingredients. They tend to last longer and pair well with a wide range of other foods. A few boxes won't take up much room, but they can act as a versatile base for combining and structuring meals from the rest of your supplies. Number 7. Nuts. There's a stage in almost every emergency that doesn't get enough attention in most planning guides. It's that initial window, the first few hours, before any routine has formed, before you fully understand what's happening. During that time, people are moving fast, gathering information, coordinating with others, and making decisions under pressure. In that phase, one quality in food matters more than anything else: portability. Not just calories on paper, but the ability to eat while in motion, in any condition, without stopping or preparing anything. You need something you can grab and consume instantly, even when your hands and attention are already tied up. Nuts fit that role almost perfectly. Just 1 ounce provides roughly 160 to 200 calories, along with healthy fats, a bit of protein, and essential minerals like magnesium and potassium. And all of that can fit into something as small as a jacket pocket. There's nothing to open, nothing to assemble. They can be eaten standing, walking, even in the dark or bad weather, while you're focused on other tasks. That ease isn't a bonus. It's the whole point. There is one detail worth thinking through before stocking up. Salted nuts are more appealing and easier to eat consistently, but they also increase thirst. If your water supply is limited, that becomes a factor you can't ignore. A balanced approach is to store both salted and unsalted varieties, and be mindful of hydration if nuts are making up a large portion of your daily intake. It's not a reason to avoid them, just something to plan for alongside your water supply. Another smart move is to portion them out in advance. Nuts are easy to overeat, especially in stressful situations. Pre-measured servings take the pressure off your willpower when your focus is already stretched thin. For storage, keep them sealed and away from heat and light to preserve freshness. Vacuum sealing can extend their shelf life even further. They're simple, efficient, and unlike many other foods, they don't rely on anything around you to be usable. They're ready the moment you need them. Number 6. Peanut butter. Ask professionals who focus on emergency nutrition to name the most efficient single item you can keep in your pantry, and one answer comes up again and again: peanut butter. The numbers make a strong case right away. Just 2 tablespoons pack in close to 200 calories, and a standard 16-ounce jar contains more than 2,000 calories overall. For an average adult with moderate activity, that's roughly an entire day's worth of energy from one container. But it's not just about how many calories it has. It's about how those calories work. Peanut butter delivers a mix of fats, protein, and carbohydrates in a balance that the body digests slowly. Instead of a quick spike followed by a crash, it provides a steady release of energy that can last for hours. When you can't rely on regular meals, that kind of consistency becomes critical, not just convenient. There's another factor that often gets overlooked: In high-stress situations, the body releases hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. While they help you respond to immediate threats, they also tend to suppress appetite, sometimes to the point where you know you should eat but feel no desire to. Even then, your body still needs fuel. Peanut butter works around that problem better than most foods. Its soft texture, mild taste, and low effort to eat make it easier to consume even when you're not hungry. It doesn't have a strong smell or flavor that might turn you off under stress, so people can keep eating it when other foods become unappealing. That reliability is something calorie counts alone don't fully capture. A practical approach is to keep at least a few jars on hand and rotate them regularly so they stay fresh. It's compact, doesn't need refrigeration until opened, and pairs easily with many other foods on this list. You're now halfway through. If this has been helpful, you can show it with a like, only if you feel it's earned. Number 5. Jerky. Jerky isn't just a modern convenience. It's one of the oldest food preservation techniques humans have ever used. This isn't marketing hype. It's been documented across dozens of cultures on nearly every continent, all arriving at the same method independently. The reason is simple. The logic works. By removing moisture from meat, you eliminate the conditions that bacteria need to grow. What you're left with is a dense, shelf-stable source of protein that doesn't require refrigeration. It's essentially meat in a concentrated, lightweight form. In practical terms, a 1-ounce serving delivers around 9 to 10 grams of complete protein. When you look at protein relative to weight and portability, very few foods come close. It's compact, easy to carry, and ready to eat with zero preparation. However, there's an important trade-off that often gets overlooked. Jerky is naturally high in sodium, and that's not accidental. The salt plays a key role in preserving it. But higher sodium intake also increases thirst, and if you don't have enough water to balance that out, it can create an added strain on your body. This doesn't mean jerky is a bad choice, it just means it needs to be used thoughtfully. If it's a regular part of your intake, make sure your water supply accounts for it. Pairing it with foods that contain moisture can also help offset that effect. It's best to think of jerky as a protein component rather than a complete meal on its own. For example, combining it with something like beans and wrapping it in a tortilla turns it into a more balanced, functional meal. Relying on it alone for multiple days, though, can lead to an excessive sodium load. For storage, keep it sealed and in a cool, dark place, and rotate it regularly to maintain freshness. When it comes to protein per ounce carried, jerky absolutely earns its spot, but it works best when you plan your hydration around it. Number 4. Canned soup. Everything else on this list mostly focuses on calories, protein, fats, or carbohydrates. This one fills a gap that barely gets discussed in typical emergency planning, but becomes incredibly important when a disruption lasts more than a few days. Hydration. Your body depends on water for almost every core function. Heart performance, brain activity, temperature control, and digestion all rely on it. In many real emergency situations, though, water access becomes uncertain, limited, or tightly rationed. That's where canned soup stands out. It's one of the few items here that provides both nutrition and liquid in the same package. The broth itself contributes directly to daily fluid intake, doing a job that foods like protein bars, nuts, or jerky simply can't. When water is scarce, that dual function becomes extremely valuable. There's also another advantage that shows up as a situation drags on. After several days of eating mostly dry, dense, or chewy foods, many people start to lose interest in them, not because they aren't hungry, but because of sensory fatigue. Research into dietary monotony shows this is a real, measurable response, separate from stress-related appetite changes. Soup breaks that cycle. It's soft, warm in feel even when not heated, and much easier on the stomach when the body has been under ongoing strain. It essentially resets how food feels after days of repetition. And contrary to what many assume, canned soup doesn't require cooking. It can be eaten straight from the can at room temperature. Heating improves the experience, but in situations where that's not possible, it still works perfectly as is. A practical approach is to choose lower sodium options, especially if other salty foods like jerky are part of your supply. Pairing soup with crackers or tortillas can also boost its calorie content and make it more filling. In practice, a single can can easily function as a complete, satisfying meal. Number 3. Pouched fish. When people first start building an emergency food supply, they usually follow a predictable pattern, stacking up the most calorie-dense foods they can find and assuming that covers everything. But there's another factor that often gets overlooked early on, and it becomes increasingly important as days of stress and disruption add up: protein. Here's what actually happens when protein intake drops during periods of physical or mental strain. The body doesn't simply wait it out. Instead, when dietary protein is lacking, it begins breaking down its own muscle tissue to meet ongoing needs. Under stress, that process can accelerate within just a few days, leading to reduced strength, lower endurance, and even diminished mental clarity, right when you need those functions the most. That's exactly why pouched fish deserves a high place in any no-cook food supply. Options like tuna, salmon, or mackerel in tear-open pouches provide a simple, reliable source of nutrition. A single pouch typically delivers around 16 to 20 grams of complete protein, and it requires nothing beyond opening the package. No cooking, no utensils, no water, just open and eat. Salmon has an additional advantage worth noting. It's one of the more concentrated shelf-stable sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Studies have consistently associated omega-3 intake with brain function, cognitive clarity, and emotional stability under pressure. In high-stress situations where clear thinking matters, that becomes more than just a nutritional detail. That said, research in this area is still evolving, and individual responses can vary. There's also a very practical consideration that people who've actually lived through extended disruptions often emphasize. In a normal kitchen, a can opener is always nearby. But during evacuations, power outages, or longer emergencies, a sealed can quickly turn into inaccessible food. Many people have learned this the hard way. Plenty of supplies on hand, but no way to open them. Pouches solve that problem entirely. They open instantly with a pull tab or tear notch, require no tools, and avoid the weight and sharp edges of traditional cans. A practical approach is to keep several on hand, rotate them into regular meals, and replace them as needed. In this case, the packaging matters just as much as the protein inside. Number 2, canned beans. If you stripped everything else away and were only allowed to keep one category of emergency food, this would be one of the strongest contenders to survive the cut. Canned beans manage to combine something very few shelf-stable foods can offer: 3 core nutritional pillars in a single ready-to-eat package: protein, carbohydrates, and dietary fiber. That combination matters more than it might seem at first glance. Protein helps preserve muscle during physical strain. Carbohydrates provide usable energy. And fiber slows digestion, which helps keep blood sugar more stable and extends the feeling of fullness after eating. Together, they create a steady, sustained energy profile that can carry someone through long stretches of physical and mental demand without constant refueling. What makes this even more useful in practice is how simple they are to use. Beans are already fully cooked during the canning process, so there's no need for heat or additional preparation. You can open the can and eat them immediately. If you choose versions with pull-tab lids, you also eliminate the need for a can opener entirely, which removes a common point of failure in real emergency situations. Their versatility is another major advantage. Beans fit easily into almost everything else on this list. They can be eaten with crackers, wrapped in a tortilla, with fish or jerky, mixed into canned soup for extra protein, or paired with nuts for a more complete meal. They don't overpower other foods, they just enhance them. On top of that, they're extremely cost-effective, shelf-stable for years, and offer a high amount of nutrition for the price. In terms of both value and practicality, canned beans consistently rank among the most efficient emergency foods available. A smart approach is to keep a variety on hand: black beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, and rotate them into regular cooking so they stay fresh. Rather than treating them as a one-time emergency purchase, it's better to make them a permanent, replenishing part of your pantry. Number 1. Ready-to-eat packaged meals. Everything else on this list has one thing in common: they still require something from you. Whether it's combining ingredients, assembling a quick meal, or at least making a small decision about how to put food together, there's always a bit of mental effort involved. Under normal conditions, that's barely noticeable. But in a real crisis, that changes fast. When you're exhausted, sleep-deprived, possibly disoriented, and juggling multiple urgent problems at once, even small decisions start to carry a real cognitive cost. Figuring out what to eat, how to combine it, and how much to use isn't just a minor task anymore. It adds to an already overloaded mental system. Ready-to-eat packaged meals are designed specifically to remove that burden entirely. They're fully prepared, nutritionally balanced, sealed for storage, and ready the moment you need them. No mixing, no cooking, no thinking. Just open the package and eat. Good quality versions are formulated to provide a complete macronutrient profile, including protein, carbohydrates, and fats, in proportions intended to support both physical energy and cognitive function in a single serving. Typically ranging from about 350 to 600 calories, they also include a broader range of micronutrients than most improvised combinations of individual foods can realistically offer. There's also a psychological advantage that often gets overlooked. In the most stressful moments, when energy is low and everything feels overwhelming, removing even a single decision can make a noticeable difference. Research on decision fatigue consistently shows that the sheer number of choices a person has to make directly affects mental performance, not just the difficulty of those choices. That said, there is a clear limitation: cost. Ready-to-eat meals are usually more expensive per calorie than anything else on this list. Because of that, they work best as a support layer rather than the foundation of a supply. Think of them as the no-effort backup option reserved for the hardest moments, not the primary source of nutrition. A practical guideline is to keep enough on hand for 1 or 2 full meals per person for the duration you're planning for, and then build the rest of your supply around the more cost-efficient foods covered earlier. Stepping back, what all of these items create together is a system. Pouched fish and canned beans provide core protein. Peanut butter, nuts, and jerky supply dense, long-lasting energy. Crackers and tortillas add structure and make other foods easier to combine. Instant oats and protein bars handle different energy needs across time. Canned fruit and canned soup support hydration, variety, and nutrient balance. And ready-to-eat meals cover the moments when thinking itself becomes too expensive. None of these foods are rare or complicated. Most are already in many kitchens in some form. The difference isn't access, it's intention. A functional emergency food supply isn't just a random collection of calories. It's a system designed to cover energy, protein, hydration, and even the psychological strain of eating under stress. And underneath all of it sits the most important element: water. Without it, the entire system collapses. The body can survive weeks without food under certain conditions, but only about 3 days without water. That makes hydration the foundation everything else depends on. A simple baseline is about 1 gallon per person per day, which means a 2-week supply is roughly 14 gallons per adult. And it's worth remembering that several foods on this list, like instant oats and canned soup, assume water is available either directly or indirectly. In the end, the biggest difference between being prepared and being caught off guard usually isn't special knowledge or extreme planning. It's whether someone made a few calm, practical decisions ahead of time and put the right things on a shelf before circumstances made it harder to do so. When conditions change suddenly, power outages, severe weather, supply disruptions, the household that planned doesn't need to figure things out in the moment. They already did.